The group we have today all worked for a company called DSS Engineers. I think I'm right in saying, and I'm sure if I'm not, one of these gentlemen will correct me, that DSS Engineers on its founding was probably the first purely desalting focused engineering firm at least in the United States and possibly elsewhere as well. To my right is Geoff Hart. In the center is Jorg Menningmann. And to my far right is O.J. Morin. Apart from the studies that you're doing, when did DSS actually design an RO plant?
I think it was either a very small brackish plant for the Autech base in Andros Island. I mean small. It had Dow fine fiber permeators, and it was only a couple 100,000 gallons per day. Got its water from a shallow infiltration gallery. But anyhow, and then about the same time, O.J. designed the Al Burq seawater RO plant in Saudi Arabia.
And that would be what year?
68.
Yeah.
78.
78.
Yeah.
Because I think that was just before I went to work for hydronautics.
That plant is still running.
Is it really?
There's some quirk. When I specified the materials for it, I specified 316. I thought that was the best we could use at the time. This is 1978. As soon as I wrote this spec, one of SWC's corrosion consultants, the famous guy from England,
Todd?
Todd.
Yeah.
Brian Todd,
Yeah.
came to me and says, "OJ, you got the wrong material." He said, "You know, I had to have the spec out in a week." And he's telling me, "Oh, you got to start all over again?" I said, "Why?" And he just explained this, and he said, "You got to be over 40, and 316 was only 32 or 34 or something. So it's going to fall apart in 6 months." Well, it's still running. It's 30 years now, I guess. And after that plant, I did the famous Bahrain Ad-Dur plant.
Ad-Dur, yeah.
That I wasn't involved after the award of the contract to the contractor. And then they changed the pretreatment system, and that's why it never ran to capacity.
Al Burq was built by a Saudi company, wasn't it?
The first job they ever did. You want to hear about the bid?
Yeah.
The bid opening was a big room full of people. There was about a dozen bidders. And the director was standing up there. I was sitting down next to him taking notes. And we got all done with bidding. The low bidder was some Saudi company that had never done a job before. The second lowest bidder was a Saudi company that had never done a job before. That was Al Kafter. And so we got through with all the bids. And a guy jumps up and he says, "Your Excellency, I have a letter." So I jumped up and said, "Don't take it. You can't take any letters." This is a public bid opening. He said, "Why not?" So we took the letter and he opened it up and he said, "Look it. Al Kafter has reduced their price 10%. They are now the low bidder." And they gave him the job.
When we started building the package plants at WET in 316 and even Schedule 80, it's 369, 370, we had horrendous times, and we had to convert right away to the Xeron material at the time, or the 254, and that was okay as long as there wasn't a thread. And then we realized that the problems came when the plant was shut down. So then we started a permeate water flush, which wasn't being done at the time. Right. They had the suckback tanks, and they were doing that with spirals as they were converting spirals, thinking they needed the same thing, but that was never needed for spirals. It was just something that grew over on the PNIDs, if you would, and because the hollow fibers had a tendency to blow up because of the architecture of the fiber. The spirals didn't have that problem. You could shut one of those things down, you never damage the membrane. But so we said, well, we want to flush the membrane for that reason, thinking we want to get the seawater out and get the biology out so it didn't grow, but primarily to get the stagnant seawater out, because that pitting around the threaded points just went anyway, even on the best material.
So one of the great stories that I've heard from DSS engineers, which has nothing to do with membranes, was Farasan Island. So you didn't go there.
No.
You went there.
Yeah.
Did you go
And
there?
I spent 3 months there,
Do
yes.
you want to tell us about Farasan Island and why it's become a legend almost in the industry?
It has?
Oh, yeah.
Farazan Island is a reef that sticks out of the ocean.
It's a rock
It's a
covered
rock.
with red, very fine red dust.
Yeah, and the rock and the roads weren't paved, and driving over them was like murder to your back. We got this job from the Saudis. It was our first job over there, and Bill Surratt and I went over to pick a site. So we're walking around. We were there for a week, I guess, and we're walking around the first, second day, whatever it was, and we found this place. It looked like a good site. So I stripped down and I was diving in, and the people all started screaming. So I stopped, and they went, "What's on?" "There's sharks in the water," they said. I said, "We got to find out what the depth is." So I swam out and found, this isn't too bad a place. So we selected a site.
Highly scientific.
Yeah, highly. And then Bill and I attempted to survey the site. Well, we did something. We made a drawing out of it. And they hired, I guess the contractor was Krupp.
Krupp Atlas, yeah.
And they hired Hyundai to do the civil work. Now that rock was all dug up by hand using pickaxe. They didn't have a
Yeah,
jackhammer.
what happened was the Saudis wouldn't let them import dynamite for security reasons. And so they obviously needed a few pipe trenches and so forth. Some excavation had to be done. They would drill holes in the rock, and then they would try to fracture it with various forms of jackhammers. And this would go on all night long. Well, not all night. It would go on till midnight under lights every night outside my construction trailer. But anyway, ultimately they failed. So what they did was, well, we'll dig down a little bit, we'll cast our concrete trenches, and then we'll import fill from God knows where on the island and build the whole site up. And ultimately that's what they did. But it was quite a place. There was not a doctor on the island. It was very primitive. We had to get there on Hyundai's tugboat.
Tugboat, yeah.
And it was a 6-hour trip from Jazan. And we had to bring the food down with the contractor. They would bring frozen chickens and stuff down on the Saudia airplane from Jeddah. And anyway, then we would take the coolers and put them on the tugboat for the long ride to Farazan.
Was it inhabited?
It was barely inhabited, yeah. You went to
Yeah,
a some
it
sort
was
of-
used by smugglers, mainly, they said, from Africa and from
So why were they
Saudi.
building a plant there?
Oh, because
To give water to the smugglers?
to give water to the people. There was a small town there, maybe 200 or 300 people. And the water they had was over 3,000 ppm. You couldn't even go near it. It smelled so badly. But that's all they had to drink. And the Saudis always said, you build a water plant and the people will come.
At the height of your activities at DSS, how many people were there?
At the end, about 45.
That plant was unusual because the color of the water was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, I don't know, was it?
Black?
Well, it wasn't black, but it was.
Close
it was
to
very,
it?
very, yeah, it was tea, and it was, I don't know, it was 200-300 color units or something.
Jeez.
Ridiculous. we were always worried about this stuff coming out on the membranes, and we were playing with the pH to make sure that it wouldn't, and using anti-scalants, and we were having problems because we did some piloting, if you remember, and come to figure out that anti-scalant was a problem and just let it go by itself, and the organic in the water was its own anti-scalant in a sense, an old chelating agent,
Yeah.
and it ran fine.
Yeah.